is the program coordinator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Lunder Conservation Center. In this role, she coordinates visits to the Lunder Conservation Center's on-site labs, coordinates virtual and in-person programming, workshops, symposia, and resources for the center for those interested in art conservation. She has held roles at the Smithsonian and the National Museum of the American Indian in early childhood education and served as a volunteer at the National Museum of American History. Anna holds a BA in art history from the University of Maryland, and she is passionate about combining art and science to create tactile, memorable, and accessible learning opportunities.
Hello. My name is Anna Nielsen. I'm the Conservation Program Coordinator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum's Lunder Conservation Center. Since 2006, the Lunder Conservation Center has used its floor-to-ceiling glass walls to allow visitors to observe conservation processes. Most of the conservation work at SAM happens in Lunder's publicly accessible spaces in the labs, but certain projects require alternative spaces. Some artworks are affixed to specific locations, like our outdoor sculptures, too heavy to easily move, too delicate to withstand excessive movement, and some are simply too big and complicated to fit into our space. James Hampton's The Throne of the Third Heaven of the nation's Millennium General Assembly, which in this talk I will refer to as the Throne of the Third Heaven, is a multi-piece installation artwork, both too delicate, large, and complicated to move into our labs. So this presented our team with a unique set of challenges. In spring of 2023, a satellite lab was created directly inside the front door of the museum's G Street entrance to house the large and delicate project with its almost 300 components. In fall of 2023, we opened the temporary satellite space to the public and showed them a glimpse into our process to allow project-related questions to be answered straight from the source. There's some pictures of the Lunder Conservation Center that were in the galleries, were around, were in the labs. James Hampton's entire artistic output was this single artwork, which he constructed for more than 14 years, from 1950 to 1964, in a garage he rented in DC's Shaw neighborhood. When he wasn't at his job as a janitor for the General Services Administration, he was working on the Throne of the Third Heaven and exploring his neighborhood for materials. The Throne of the Third Heaven is a large-scale artwork composed of found and repurposed everyday materials, which include furniture, colored papers, cardboard, aluminum foil, wrapping paper, light bulbs, vases, just to name a few. Inspiration was drawn from the Bible and its book of Revelation to bring his vision to life, consisting of winged stands, pulpits, plaques, crowns, tables, structural vases, and its winged throne. Following his death in 1964, the artwork came into the possession of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, where it remains to be one of the museum highlights to this day. More information on the treatment of this artwork can be found on WCG's YouTube page at the 2023 Emerging Professionals Talk, where Katia gave a wonderful presentation about her treatments. But today we're going to focus on the visible conservation that was conducted in the fall of 2023. Ooh. So the case study, our throne room. This is our satellite space that we used for the project. Roughly 1/3 of the artwork's components were on display, but the remaining 2/3 needed to be a space to be examined and documented. This project required many logistical considerations, including security, space constraints, fragility and complexity of the artwork, access to our loading dock, temperature and humidity controls, lighting, the list goes on. So this empty gallery space that was just inside of the G Street's entrance was the solution. This location had access to our loading dock. Security was installed because it was a former gallery space. The doors were able to be locked. We had adjustable lighting, and we were able to accommodate the scale of this project. And this space also allowed us to have a separate photography space on site where the photography treatment could be done steps away from the treatment. Interpretation of the throne was not new to my team. We have done programs for all ages, including for the Throne of the Third Heaven. This includes gallery talks, family talks, bring your child to work day, and take-home activities, such as creating a crown out of tinfoil. We also had light aging experiments that students could take home, so really engaging all different types of audiences. Now that the satellite lab had been set up, that's where my work comes in. Navigating a project of this capacity was not something that had been done by my team, and the space in itself was a challenge. The project involved with getting in touch with just about every department in the museum, and lots of learning along the way. Security measures and key creation, since we needed a secure collection space. Security was made aware of times when the space was going to be open to the public and monitored the hallway to ensure that there wasn't any crowding outside of the space. Curatorial consultation on language to use when speaking to the public. There was some misinformation circulating about the artist, so we wanted to coordinate with our curator to come up with ways to refocus the conversation on the artwork and recenter conservation. Curatorial and registrar both reviewed all public-facing text. Our registrar department worked to make sure that the space was secure and operable during open hours. We worked with exhibitions closely to make signage for our space. We worked with their interpretation team to make some Spanish translations and verbiage for signage. We worked with our external affairs team to coordinate postings on our calendar and our newsletter. We worked with our development team because this was a project that was featured in campaigns such as Giving Tuesday. Our boots on the ground team, this project would not have been possible without these three. Katia Zinsley, Eliza McDonald, and Melissa Perez. This team had the monumental task of balancing the conservation work with public engagement while simplifying complex processes for accessibility for the public. So our conservation intern, Melissa, acted as the bridge between the public and the satellite lab. So she was offering historical context as well as fielding visitor questions. Katia provided expertise on the treatment and conservation processes, and Eliza managed documentation and logistics while engaging visitors. Our schedule. So visitors could observe live conservation work during 20 scheduled public viewing sessions, each lasting 4 hours, from October to mid-December 2023. This created a structured yet accessible format for public participation. And this resulted in 80 hours of work that had the potential to be interrupted. So if anybody's thinking about doing something like this, 80 hours of work. So I just have some pictures here of our setup. Some things I want to note is that we purchased plexi barriers for this project. We created a corral inside of the door that blocked 2 sides with plexiglass and 1 side was with double stanchions. I do want to note up on the top right-hand corner, double stanchions are key when working with all audience types because not everybody's eyesight is level to where they would see the top stanchion. Some of our smaller visitors can walk right under some of those average hip height stanchions. So making sure that we are creating a barrier for all ages and heights. Since the room was collection storage, we wanted to make sure we posted signage that asks that photos were not taken in the space. We also posted signage giving a brief description of what was happening in our space. Our signage also encouraged exploration between 3 different areas of the museum. So we had signage at the actual throne within the gallery, we had signage up in the conservation lab, and then outside of the throne space. We also provided a QR code so visitors could check event times and be able to plan their visit. So, engaging our audiences. We wanted to make sure that we managed our visitor expectations and that it was clearly communicated that staff were performing actual conservation work, not just staging demonstrations, that we were not actually making any artwork in this space, and that we were not adding any new materials to this artwork, such as new tinfoil. We also wanted to make sure that we limited interaction during delicate and time-sensitive tasks. So when we had the open hours, we ensured that any time-sensitive or delicate tasks that were being done were not at interruptible times. Conservation techniques were explained in public-friendly terms to ensure accessibility for a wide audience, including children and those with no prior art or science background. We encourage visitors to ask questions about the artwork, the conservation process, and the role of conservation in museums. We used visual aids like photos of the throne and material touchboards. This is one of our touchboards that we used. So you can see we have different types of tinfoil, we have wrapping paper, and actually while this was in our space, this paper here that is similar to the type that was used on the throne actually started to discolor. So it faded within the light just in the gallery space. We also had prepared explanations for frequent questions so we would be able to streamline visitor interactions. We wanted to make sure that we were protecting both the artwork, our visitors, and our staff while we were in this space. Many visitors expressed surprise and fascination at seeing conservation up close for the first time. This gave us lots of feedback and stories. There was a gentleman who said he kept a postcard of the throne in his fridge for years, and a little girl was inspired to create a tinfoil tea party after seeing the artwork. We also had conversations with several students that were interested in conservation and jobs and internships in museums. What I did want to note is we noticed some post-pandemic trends. So post-COVID, there has been a trend of shorter attention spans. So we would have shorter conversations, and they would be very quick, and people would be on their way. But we did notice increased curiosity and engagement with the piece, and that we were transparent with the work that was happening. We were featured in the SAM blog as well as Smithsonian Magazine, both during and after the treatment. So I think having some of this press was really helpful to be able to encourage visitors as well. So after this whole process, we learned that public curiosity about conservation made the program a success, and that real life engagement enhanced the visitors museum experience. We had a diverse team with different areas of expertise, so that allowed for rich, well-rounded interactions. And that we also were able to accommodate specialized groups. So we brought in groups of students, we brought in groups, WCG came up during the safety summit, which was wonderful. And so being able to really accommodate different types of audiences. What some challenges that we found that we learned while we were doing this project. Feedback for this project was only during open hours, so we really only had verbal communication. Avenues for written feedback would help us gather more information going forward. All visitation was counted with a hand clicker, which was great hand exercise, but we might have looked into different methods of visitor counting in the future. We also would look into multilingual interpretation. We actually did pay for Spanish interpretation and didn't end up using it. And this was because the interpretation that was done, there was a word that was used that kind of didn't really try to get the point across that we were giving on our signage. And so we ended up just not using the Spanish interpretation. But we did, luckily, Melissa is bilingual, and so she was able to kind of do that hands-on Spanish interpretation for us. Future applications. So with the insights that we gained for planning future projects, we really are going to use this as a model to develop scalable templates for future programs so we can help reduce our planning time going forward. And having a timeline and identifying representatives from key departments is also key. Instead of just contacting the department, you have somebody who's already aware of your project. We would also look to have we had continuous improvement during the project, but having some sort of written evaluation. Of note, so I did just want, if anybody is ever interested in doing a project like this, public interaction took a large part of our treatment time. As I mentioned, it was about 80 hours. So that is 80 hours where you're not getting 100% of the work done. We did have somebody fully dedicated to being the bridge with the public, and that was definitely an asset to have with this group. We did focus work outside of the public hours, and we had the concise explanations for common questions so we could streamline that engagement. We did also provide weekend hours to accommodate visitor peak times, so that's something to consider as well. Also, your team, you are putting mental and physical strain on them, and they are in our space for security. We did have 2 people in the space at all times, but 3 was ideal to rotate out for breaks because we wanted to make sure our team maintained energy and focus, and the role of speaker was rotated as well. Our preventative measures. We were protecting the artwork, so we implemented clear barriers with physical distancing to ensure components remained untouched by visitors. We literally leaned over as far as we could to make sure that everything was out of reach. But we also wanted to protect our staff. So we had security in the outside hallway, which is their normal rotation. The room was able to be locked. We had project-specific information, such as our calendar and PII, during visitor hours were blocked. We ensured that photos were not taken of the space and all staff were marked by badges. We did advertise this program and have it visible on our calendar, but something to note, you saw how small our corral was. We didn't want to encourage large waves of visitors, so we had visitors trickling in, which was actually more beneficial to visitation. But we also leveraged the Smithsonian calendars and email newsletters. And we used clear, engaging signage to direct visitors to the satellite lab. So to wrap up, the satellite lab for James Hampton's Throne of the Third Heaven offered a rare opportunity to make conservation truly interactive. Visitors didn't just get to watch, it was a chance for them to ask questions, see tools and techniques up close, and hear directly from our team. We welcomed a total of 2,780 visitors in our 80 hours. This project taught us so much, from balancing hands-on work with public engagement to collaborating across nearly every department in the museum. The setup was designed with engagement in mind, from signage and touchboards to live explanations of the process. We wanted people to feel connected, not just to the artwork, but to the efforts that preserve our artworks for future generations. It was a powerful reminder of how people value the transparency and connection, and it's something that we hope to build on for future projects. Thank you for listening. Questions if we haven't, or if you want to wear the tinfoil crown, you can also do that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did the public react? Because everybody is so used to taking pictures of everything now, how did the public react when they were told they couldn't take photos?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did have a sign outside that had the no photo kind of image. Right when you walked in through the doorway, there was a no photo image. There was also one on the signage. So we wanted to make sure it was at eye level wherever you were standing. But we also luckily had Melissa, who was greeting every visitor that was coming into the space, and she would see if somebody was sneaking out their phone. People were also very responsive. If we did see them take a photo, that we would ask them to delete it, and people were okay with that, and they would delete it from their phones. That's a good question though, because that is something that we were thinking about. Yeah.
While you were doing that, were you communicating to the public why there was no photography?
We would tell them that it was that we were trying to control the narrative, and so we wanted to be able to tell exactly what we were doing in the space. We were talking about how this is a project that was eventually going to be on view, but it was kind of a behind the scenes, and so having that behind the scenes kind of secret peek into the world of conservation was kind of a special moment for them to be there. And so they were very responsive to that. Yes?
So there's signage directing between the satellite lab and do you have any idea if the impact on the numbers of people visiting the Lunder lab are increased?
We do have foot traffic counters up in the Lunder lab, so I haven't done it at this point, but I would be able to go through and cross-reference the dates and times that we had open. But the days, we do know for a fact that our Saturdays are our busiest day at this time according to the foot traffic counters, and so since we had the open lab or the satellite lab open on Saturdays, we were directing people up to the lab space. So we were, but just by word of mouth, increasing traffic. I have heard that you are able to look at QR codes and that you can see which ones were hit. I haven't gone down that avenue, but you can see if people were looking at the QR code that was on the signage outside of our space versus the QR codes that were upstairs or as well as in the gallery.
I was wondering about the planning. You talked about how this space was really great for you to work in for all those different reasons when you found it, but was the desire always to share you were going to be in this space, like did the idea just come to open those doors to the public because you're so connected to them being right outside the door, or do you think that came early on or was later seen as an opportunity while you're in that space?
Yeah, so with the Lunder Lab, outreach is what we do, and we are talking with the public and we're looking at every opportunity to make something publicly accessible. So our head of the lab had a wonderful idea that we would be able to open this to the public, but at select times. So that was the key of having select hours that we would invite the public in, that it wouldn't be a fully visible process. That's where those locking doors came into play. Great. Thank you.
Caitlin Mahony. She is a conservator at the National Museum of the American Indian Smithsonian Institution. She holds an MA from the UCLA Getty program for the conservation of archaeological and ethnographic materials, and a BA in anthropology from Skidmore College. Caitlin is currently serving on the advisory board for the UCLA Andrew W. Mellon Opportunity for Diversity and Conservation internship program, and previously served on the board of directors for WCG. When you're ready. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way.
Awesome. Let's see, brilliant. Thank you, Janelle, and thank you, WCG. I love the 3-ring circus event. It's such a great time to reconnect with other conservators and museum folks. And I'm sure many of you are connected to the Smithsonian. I'm just gonna make that assumption in some way, being in the Washington area. So I thought I would share an example of one way the shared stewardship and ethical returns policy of the Smithsonian has been put into action. And this is a current project at NMAI, and we're calling it Home of Mi'kma'ki Project. And I definitely want to say that I am just one of many people on this project, including conservators, registrar, collection staff, and archives. Our NMAI partnership with the Mi'kma'ki Debert Cultural Center starts because of the collection items themselves. So we have over 500 cultural belongings that are coming from Mi'kmaq communities, mostly in Nova Scotia, but also in Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland. And these are coming from 2 anthropologists that were mostly working directly with our predecessor Museum of the American Indian, and in the early 20th century. Between 1999 and 2019, MDCC staff came down from Nova Scotia with community members to the Cultural Resources Center over 10 times after finding that this collection was here, to research it and connect with it, and especially bring elders with language knowledge down. In 2012 was the first time that we established a memorandum of understanding, and we renewed this in 2021. At first, we were working towards a long-term community loan, and that's something that NMAI has been doing since the beginning. But now that the Smithsonian has an official language for this type of relationship and has further evolved the ways that we can relate to communities and other tribal organizations, we're moving towards this shared stewardship agreement. And that is to return all these items to Nova Scotia for the opening of their public facility in 2027. So this has been like almost a 30-year venture for them. This work is community driven, and it is grant funded by their work, in large part by their efforts in getting Canadian funding for this project. For those of you that aren't as aware of the Maritimes, because my knowledge of Canadian geography was terrible prior to starting this, this is the area of, it's a little blurry, I apologize, but this is the area, the homelands of the Mi'kmaq in Mi'kma'ki, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. I made the decision to not show a video tonight, but I made a QR code hoping that you would pull out your phones and scan it to watch it later, because obviously what's lacking tonight is the community voice. And this video that is on the Mi'kmaq Debert Cultural Center's website was created by their Elders Advisory Council, and it is a short and inspiring video that
that just drives home the importance of bringing the items home at now before certain elders pass and knowledge is lost, and for their own space to tell their own stories. So thank you for scanning that. But I will say, while you won't be able to catch their voices in the video, I do want to show the faces of our partners that we're working with on a daily basis. This very small but mighty crew, led by their executive director, Tim Bernard, collections manager Sharon Farrell, Leah Rosenmeyer, Camden Nicholas, and Gerald Glode. But again, there are many advisory groups that have been established by the Mi'kmaq Cultural Center, including boarding school survivors, the Elders Advisory Councils, and these are people whose teachings and advisings are continually brought up in our meetings, and have impacted the work greatly. This is the stunning image of what the future Mi'kmaq Cultural Center will look like, and it is going to be on a site of important archaeological activity in Debert, Nova Scotia. And the Cultural Center, while it is going to have a public-facing facility like many of our institutions, if you've ever been to the Cultural Resources Center of NMAI, it's also going to have an entire half of the institution that is meant for access for community to these cultural belongings. And so a lot of thought is going into what that space looks like, how it facilitates family visits, so how are the items themselves being organized, whether it's by family, by item, by community, and what that looks like. So again, like already this is shifting from the idea of a loan where you might be working through the process of preparing things for exhibition. This is considering larger scale, and also just for them to be in the community's center for access. I wanted to call out some key aspects. So I've already reiterated that this is a big shift in terms of how we're conceiving this relationship and formalizing those documents. And I'll just be clear, like we haven't actually formalized that yet. Those discussions are still happening, even though the work has been going on for many years. The items are going to be accessible for learning, healing, and reconnection. We've had to create systems to share data and collaborate that cross time zones, borders, and the various advisory groups. We've been supporting our partners in exhibition planning and facility design as well through sharing our expertise and knowledge here. And we've also been, on the other end, interrogating our ways of practices for realizing true partnership and supporting Mi'kmaq ways of doing and being through all of our preparation. So this work began in earnest in 2022 for me, when we had two staff from the Mi'kmaq Cultural Center, so Camden Nicholas and Basil Johnson, who you are only seeing the backs of in this picture, apologies. They came down for 9 months and dedicated 9 months of their time to work with conservation staffs, fellows, and interns to look at every item in the Mi'kmaq collection, which already started this co-looking and co-working together set a different tone for the project instead of some kind of delayed packaged information on the status or health of the collection coming later. And I've already mentioned this, but having fellows and interns early in their career was key to this project, and it was about exposing them to a methodology of working in service to community. To do this work, we needed to be able to have real-time data exchange with community back home, and that meant having a space that had equal access and not privileged either institution's database. So we used a web-based platform, and again, this was
driven by the Mi'kmaq, who created a mural board, which is, if you're in the Smithsonian system, you might do jam boards, but it's one of those platforms where every post-it note there is linking to another board, another conservation report is linking to an exhibition report, so it's many layers that can move and relate and be edited, and multiple people can be viewing the same thing at the same time. It was, I'll be honest, a lot of work to then have track data as it changes and put the information into our database systems afterwards, but it's a critical part of the way that this works and evolves. The Mi'kmaq came to us with their own ideas of conservation and preservation that are based on Mi'kmaq ways of doing and being, and a lot of forethought and intention went into structuring of the phase of preparing things for things to go home. So for our MDCC partners, they designed community groups based on artistic practice that the items were. So if they were items that had been made out of birch with porcupine quill, they sought out community members, artists that were working in those materials, that formed a support network, and then had key spokespeople working with us and coming to visit us and guide this work. And so they're part of this process now and will be a huge part of guiding care and preservation when the items return home. So working together with these practitioner groups and MDCC staff for each set of basketry items, beaded items, and quilled items, we were able to set larger intentions that guided the conservation phase, which I will say is currently beginning. And all of this work is very much in line with the conservation practice NMA established, and that continues to evolve with the work with our constituencies. So it's about preserving what is valued and acknowledging the expertise of our Indigenous constituency, facilitating their own community care of their cultural items and working in service too. So I wanted to give you some examples of what this work has looked like. This quill workers practitioner group with master quillers as well as apprentices. They first visited in March of 2024, where we first looked at all of the quilled items, got some shared understanding of materials, vocabulary, description, and started looking at condition and even like what is stable and unstable, and defining that for this project based on their knowledge of the materials. So I will say the second visit just happened. That happened 2 weeks ago and was incredibly successful. We were able to move forward, agree upon our intentions for the next phase of preparation and treatment, and begin the cleaning process themselves. I wish I had an image of everyone really having their hand at cleaning. So part of that first visit though, as I said, was evaluating different cleaning techniques, looking at the effects the cleaning techniques had, say, on the birch and what qualities it brought back, and then what like tangible aspects it revealed that was important for the story to tell. So the quality of the birch itself, say, being restored, so then really emphasizing, you know, different collecting times and ways that what they were looking for as they were harvesting birch. This is our beadworkers practitioner group that also came sorry, I didn't update this since the first time. They've come twice as well. During our visits, we did a lot of stabilizing beadwork as we were discussing instabilities and options.
Nick and Jocelyn, our two beadwork experts, were able to do the repairs kind of on the spot, which was incredible. So we were able to say, like, you have the knowledge and the facility that no one has in this room to do these types of repairs. And they were deciding on, you know, using kind of our approaches to using threads that might make the repairs very visible, loving the materials and options in the lab and our lights, and we're able to make the repairs before they traveled, because there was a concern of beadwork being lost during that, you know, transition period. But a lot of those repairs for textile garments are going to be happening later when the items are in community. We also were able to analyze thread materials. Nick took some samples himself because they had community questions about what certain thread materials were, and look at them under the microscope and confirm for themselves what they were. Our basketry practitioner group has come twice this year as well. And one of the main inquiries we had was about how a broom was made. A broom for a barn that may, for some of us, seemed like a straightforward item. It took all of our attention, and we spent the entire week talking about how it was potentially made. And we had Evan Cooney help us out from Natural History Museum with his x-ray, so that we were actually able to x-ray and understand how it was made. And then we were able to do conservation repairs on the spot, because this item was going to be on exhibition, and we wanted to have it repaired and ready to go as soon as it came back. So as you can kind of tell from these examples, we really wanted to use NMAI's resources, our knowledge and training, to answer any questions that we had that were coming up in our discussions and the community had. So really supporting it with all the just supporting it with our knowledge base, or what equipment we have before it might return to Nova Scotia. We appreciate the Greater Smithsonian contribution, so the x-ray on the left. And we have made 2 visits now to Carla Dove's Feather Lab at the Natural History Museum, because certain feather identifications were really important for recovering stories of these items, but also for, you know, something as simple as permits needed for crossing the border. So that's been an incredible amount of assistance. And we're also seeking ways to work with MCI folks for answering questions related to clarifying pencil writings that are on our birch items that have names and places and dates, as well as potential dye analysis, supporting our Mi'kmaq partners are hosting a natural dye symposium, and we are asking ourselves, what ways can we support things preemptively through analysis? We are getting the word out about our project, whether it's through our own Smithsonian blogs, our NMAI magazine, or just supporting with photos and images, stories that our community partners have been sharing. We really want to highlight this project and get support for it. And we've put a lot into hosting our visitors. You know, these trips, Camden has made all 6 of them this year and spent 9 months with us 2 years ago. And it's a huge effort, a huge trip down from Nova Scotia. And, you know, it takes a lot to welcome visitors in and get the good work done. Our partners have invited us as well to Nova Scotia last summer. An important part for us too to return the act of them showing up dozens of times and us needing to come and understand
this incredible place, where they very thoughtfully organized our trip to meet project advisors and meet key members, folks that are driving the project in Nova Scotia. For us to work with our practitioners that are guiding our practice coming into their studio space. And I will say the act of being in Nova Scotia, where these materials grow and where these animals live, and making this art in that place really drives home the need for the items to be fully understood in place. And then we also visited places of key cultural significance to the Mi'kmaq, but also specifically to this project. So visiting specific island and locations where we know that the items were collected and that the people connected to these items lived and celebrated their lives. So next steps include starting the process, which has just started happening. Our documentation phase for this project, which we are designing, really asking ourselves what we need for shared stewardship and what's going to serve our partners, facilitating any analysis to answer community questions, and mount making for the exhibition items, creating this shared stewardship agreement. There's still a lot to discuss. Planning for packing and shipping, including all those permits to cross the border. Supporting them in exhibition design questions, working with their designer on certain aspects to make things easy to rotate, and material selection, and then making plans to continue this relationship, because it doesn't end when the items go to Nova Scotia. Thinking about what does that partnership relationship look like as things continue, as our relationship grows. And then just to put this image up, because for me it encapsulates everything about this project. This is a picture on the left of Charlotte Wilmot wearing her regalia in Nova Scotia in 1930. And this is Camden Nicholas, the staff member I told you who spent significant time working with us, wearing her regalia in 2022. So the mission of our museum is to support cultural continuity, and that's what this project seems to do at its core. So let me know if you have any questions, and please check out the Mi'kmaq Cultural Center's website. Thank you.